The lie always sounds confident right before it collapses. Somewhere along the line, the story about you stopped being updated. It didn't just drift. It ran off the rails. People didn't merely misunderstand your absence. They finished your life for you. They spoke about you in the past tense while you were still breathing, still becoming, still very much in the process of loading your next level. That's how reckless the gossip got. That's how comfortable people felt narrating an ending they were never assigned to write. There's an uncomfortable truth most people don't like admitting. According to research on social transmission, false information spreads significantly faster than verified truth, especially when the story involves downfall, humiliation, or disappearance. The human brain loves a collapse arc. It gives people a shortcut to feeling important without doing anything important. So when you stepped away, went quiet, or moved off their radar, your absence became their entertainment. Silence wasn't seen as growth. It was declared extinction. Cue the dramatic commentary. What they didn't account for was time doing its quiet work behind closed doors. While mouths were busy, life was recalibrating you. While rumors were being updated hourly, you were rebuilding in ways that don't announce themselves. No press release, no dramatic countdown, just progress happening off camera, the kind that doesn't look impressive until it suddenly does. And now you're back in rooms you were supposedly erased from, alive, clear-eyed, functioning, upgraded. Suddenly the gossip sounds confused, almost comedic. You can hear the panic hiding under the jokes. Didn't we say they were done? Wait, how are they okay? That awkward laugh people do when reality walks in uninvited. Funny how a resurrection becomes a punchline when people don't know how to explain being wrong. This isn't about revenge, it's about exposure. When someone returns from a chapter others confidently closed, it reveals who was guessing, who was projecting, and who was secretly rooting for the worst. You didn't come back to prove anything. You came back because life wasn't finished, and life doesn't check gossip before it moves forward. So if the rumors say you died and respawned like it's a joke, let them laugh. Some people cope with embarrassment through humor. Others cope by rewriting the story. But one thing they can't do anymore is pretend you're gone. And that's where things start getting very uncomfortable. For them. Number one, they didn't watch you heal. They watched you disappear. When people talk about you as if you vanished, it isn't because they didn't see you. It's because they refused to witness the real work happening behind the scenes. Healing, growing, and transforming aren't visual spectacles. They don't happen on a schedule that fits anyone else's narrative. While gossip thrived, while people assumed you were broken beyond repair, you were quietly rebuilding the foundations of your life. They weren't seeing the quiet nights, the early mornings, the decisions that no one applauded, the moments when you stared at yourself and refused to settle for less than truth. They saw a blank space and filled it with stories that suited them, stories that let them feel superior, safe, and in control while you did the hard work. They didn't watch the way you wrestled with yourself, the way you faced things that no one else could even comprehend, the way you learned to navigate pain without turning it into a performance for anyone else. They saw absence and mistook it for defeat. They mistook silence for surrender, distance for disappearance, and reflection for resignation. And when you finally emerged, whole, stronger and unbending, it didn't fit the narrative they had built. That's why their mouths ran faster than their minds, why gossip spun like a wildfire out of control. The truth doesn't fit easily into the stories people want to tell, especially when the truth makes them look small. You didn't need their attention. You didn't need their approval. You didn't need them to witness the blood, sweat, and tears that went into becoming untouchable in your own right. The irony is delicious. They spent all that energy thinking you were gone, and meanwhile, You were becoming a living contradiction. You weren't dead, you weren't broken, you weren't even close to finished. And now, every whisper, every snicker, every "I told you so" from them lands hollow, because the reality they tried to erase exists anyway, in ways that cannot be denied, cannot be rewritten, and cannot be dismissed. They didn't watch you heal, they watched you disappear. And disappearing was exactly what gave you the freedom to come back and make their assumptions look like the shallow, insecure fantasies they always were. Number 2. They announced your ending too early. Some people are so desperate to feel control that they start narrating endings that don't belong to them. They act like they hold the final chapter of your life in their hands, declaring you finished, broken, irrelevant, done. They spread it like it's fact, like the world owes them belief. And the crazy part is, they don't even realize how fragile that makes them. Because when life moves on its own terms, when you survive and thrive despite their predictions, their early declarations explode in their faces. They told the story of your demise with confidence because it was easy. It fit their need for drama, their craving to feel superior, their desire to mark themselves as witnesses to your failure. It doesn't matter if they had evidence, logic, or even truth on their side. Confidence alone made it believable. And for a while, people bought it. The gossip chain ran like wildfire. They could talk freely, thinking they were recording history. But what they failed to account for is that history isn't written by gossip. It's written by reality. When you returned, alive, present, sharper, and stronger, all of their assumptions collapsed instantly. That casual certainty, the one that made them so proud, turned into embarrassment, confusion, and panic. People who announced your ending too early had to scramble to reconcile what they thought with what actually existed. Their voices faltered, their stories conflicted, their gossip, once loud and confident, sounded frantic and absurd. Every "I told you so" they had prepared in advance became meaningless because reality had already done the talking. They wanted a neat conclusion to fit their comfort. They wanted a headline they could brag about. But life doesn't wait for anyone's validation, and it certainly doesn't conform to other people's scripts. You didn't fail. You didn't collapse. You didn't vanish forever. You came back on your own timeline, and the truth of your existence left them scrambling to explain a narrative they tried to close prematurely. They announced your ending too early, and now every word they said echoes as proof that the loudest declarations often come from the weakest understanding. Your survival made their certainty look foolish, and that truth is unstoppable. Number 3. Their mouths ran ahead of reality. Some people just can't wait. They feel the need to speak, to comment, to announce, even before anything has actually happened. Their mouths run faster than reality can keep up, and when that happens, chaos becomes inevitable. They saw your absence, your silence, or your low moments, and instead of pausing to understand, they started narrating a story that suited them. They filled in the blanks with assumptions, exaggerations, and outright lies, acting like the world needed their version of events as the truth. The problem is, truth has a stubborn way of catching up, and when it does, it hits harder than any rumor ever could. Every confident statement they made, every casual claim about your downfall, became a trap for themselves. While they were busy creating stories, you were moving, growing, and preparing in ways they couldn't even perceive. They didn't see the late nights of reflection, the discipline, the silent victories that no one applauded. Their commentary assumed the worst, because fear and insecurity often masquerade as certainty. And now, when you appear fully intact, fully yourself, their words echo like empty noise, frantic, scattered, and embarrassing. There's a kind of panic in people when the story they built for someone else falls apart. That panic shows itself in contradictions, in double takes, in the forced laughter they try to hide behind. They were so sure of your end that they didn't plan for your presence, your resilience, your rise. Every lie they told, every exaggeration they spread, now works against them. You became the reality that outpaced their gossip, the proof that assumptions are dangerous when spoken too loudly. Their mouths ran ahead of reality, but reality caught up anyway. You didn't need to argue. You didn't need to prove them wrong. You simply existed, unbothered and unshaken, and that alone dismantled everything they tried to force into existence. Now, the very same mouths that spoke with confidence are left stumbling, searching for an explanation, realizing that sometimes being loud isn't the same as being right. Your life moved forward, unstoppable, while their stories unraveled. Number 4. You became proof that narratives can collapse. There's a hidden thrill in telling stories about other people, especially when those stories are about their downfall. It makes people feel clever, powerful, like they've got the inside scoop on a life they aren't actually living. But when you return intact, thriving and unbothered, the carefully constructed narratives they built start to crumble in front of them. Every confident statement, every rumor, every whispered prediction about your end becomes evidence of their own misjudgment. Suddenly, the loudest storytellers are the most exposed, and the very reality they tried to contain refuses to fit their fiction. People hate being wrong in public. They hate when their assumptions collapse under the weight of facts, and your comeback does exactly that. You didn't just survive, you dismantled their version of your life, piece by piece, without lifting a finger. Every laugh they forced, every comment they made trying to explain their disbelief, was a desperate patch on a story they had already proven false. Your presence alone became the argument they couldn't make, the contradiction they couldn't escape, and the uncomfortable truth they couldn't spin into something entertaining. Narratives aren't supposed to fail so spectacularly, but they do when the storyteller loses track of the truth. You were assumed to be done, invisible and defeated, but life had a different plan. By simply existing on your own terms, you showed that stories, no matter how loudly spoken, are meaningless if they aren't backed by reality. The irony is sharp. Those who shouted the loudest about your supposed failure are now scrambling, rewriting, or mumbling excuses because their certainty has been exposed as fragile and hollow. You became proof that narratives can collapse because you refused to conform to anyone else's expectations. You didn't bend, you didn't beg, you didn't perform for their validation. You lived, and in living, you revealed a truth that no rumor could contain. That reality has its own timing, its own rules, and its own way of humbling those who try to claim authority over another person's life. Every story they told about your end now exists only as a cautionary monument to their miscalculation. Number 5. They needed you. Dead to feel safe. It's not physical safety they were chasing. It's the illusion of control, the sense that the world makes sense because you're out of it. Some people measure their own value by how much someone else struggles, and when you disappeared, when you stepped away from the chaos they thrived in, it left a hole they couldn't fill with truth. They needed you gone so they could breathe easier, feel taller, feel justified in their assumptions. Your presence disrupted that comfort, and every time you showed signs of life, growth, or success, it rattled them in ways they didn't want to admit. The cruel irony is that they weren't thinking about you at all. They were thinking about themselves, their insecurities, their narratives, their need to look clever to anyone watching. You became a threat simply by existing, by refusing to conform to the small, predictable version of life they imagined for you. When someone builds their confidence around the disappearance of another person, the return of that person is seismic. It exposes the emptiness behind their smugness, and suddenly, all the jokes, gossip, and exaggerated claims feel hollow. They underestimated the power of resilience. They assumed absence meant defeat. And when you reappeared, intact, alive, and fully functional, it wasn't just shocking, it was humiliating. Every whisper of "I told you so" backfires because the reality is impossible to argue against. You are alive, thriving, and untouchable on your own terms. Their false sense of safety is gone, replaced with the uncomfortable awareness that they never controlled anything to begin with. You didn't fight them. You didn't need to. You existed, and that alone made them panic. Every forced smile, every nervous joke, every frantic correction is evidence of the truth they can't face. You weren't meant to fit into their cage of expectations, and your return proved that their sense of security was always a lie. They needed you dead to feel safe, but life had other plans, and now their panic is the only response they can muster while you walk freely in the world they thought they controlled. Number 6. They turn shock into a joke. Because fear is embarrassing. When people see something they can't explain, their first instinct isn't always to process it quietly, it's to mask it. They turn disbelief into humor, shock into sarcasm, and panic into jokes, because fear is embarrassing, and nobody wants to look small in front of others. That's exactly what happened when they watched your resurrection unfold. Suddenly, the person they assumed was gone, finished or broken, reappeared fully intact, calm, and untouchable. Their mouths tried to keep up, but the only sound they could produce that didn't betray them was laughter, forced, nervous, and uneven. They laughed because it was easier than admitting they were wrong. They laughed because reality was uncomfortable, and humor offered a disguise. Every joke about you coming back from the dead or respawning wasn't really about you. It was about them trying to reclaim composure while their assumptions collapsed. Deep down, they felt the panic that comes from realizing life isn't going to obey their scripts, but on the surface, they wrapped that panic in sarcasm and meme-level commentary to convince themselves they were fine. It's a common trick. If the truth is too heavy, make it light. If reality is too sharp, dull it with ridicule. But jokes can't erase the facts. They can't make your presence less real, your survival less undeniable, or your growth less visible. Every laugh, every sarcastic comment, every meme that tries to trivialize your return is evidence that they don't know how to process what they thought was impossible. The humor is a shield, not a victory. It's a way to survive the embarrassment of being wrong in front of a world that now sees exactly what they misjudged. By the time they realize that laughing doesn't change the truth, the impact has already hit. Your return, your strength, your unbothered presence isn't a joke. It's reality catching up, and they are stuck performing a comedy while the main event, your life, continues uninterrupted. Shock disguised as humor only delays the reckoning. It doesn't stop it. And that's why every sarcastic comment they throw your way is just proof that the truth has unsettled them far more than they want to admit. Number 7, they spoke about you like a closed chapter. People have a way of filing others away as if their story can be neatly finished, like a book placed on a shelf once it's been read. That's what they did to you. They spoke about you in past tense, referenced you as if you were a memory, and treated your absence as a permanent condition. Every comment, every rumor, every sideways glance reinforced the idea that your story had ended. They didn't see you struggling, growing, or quietly building. They didn't notice the late nights where you faced your own shadows, the small victories that never made headlines, or the relentless grind that was turning you into someone they couldn't predict or control. By treating you as a closed chapter, they gave themselves permission to feel superior, to act confident, to speak without consequence. They assumed that absence equals elimination, that silence equals defeat. And for a time, that illusion worked in their favor. They could laugh about your supposed failure, feel clever for predicting it, and enjoy the comfort of certainty that only exists when someone else is underestimated. But certainty is a dangerous friend when it's built on false assumptions. Your story wasn't over, and the moment you returned, intact, capable, and thriving, the narrative they had constructed collapsed. The discomfort they feel now isn't just about being wrong. It's about realizing how fragile their control always was. They treated your life as if it belonged to them to define, and now reality proves that it never did. Every awkward laugh, every defensive comment, every attempt to rewrite the past is evidence of their failure to respect what was never theirs to manage. Your return forces a reckoning. Life doesn't care about chapters people want to close, and truth refuses to stay on a shelf. You weren't a footnote, a memory, or a story they could archive. You existed in real time, moving forward on your own terms. The closed chapter they thought they authored is now open, and they're scrambling to keep up. What they assumed was the end was only the beginning, and that beginning is unstoppable. Number 8. They don't know which version of you to explain. People love neat explanations. They need a version of reality that fits into their comfort zone, a story that makes sense without requiring them to confront complexity. That's why, when you came back stronger, sharper, and undeniably alive, they froze. They had memorized the you that existed in their assumptions: weak, absent, finished, predictable. That version fit into their gossip, their jokes, and their sense of superiority. But the real you, the one that returned with confidence, clarity, and undeniable presence, that version doesn't fit any narrative they can control, and now every word they say contradicts the truth they can't escape. When someone shows up fully evolved after being underestimated, it creates chaos in the minds of those who thought they had all the answers. They stumble over contradictions. Yesterday you were gone, finished, or over, and today you're thriving, untouchable and unshakable. Their explanations clash with their earlier declarations, their stories unravel under the weight of reality, and the frantic scrambling to reconcile the two is almost comical to watch, if it weren't so painfully revealing. You've become the living evidence that people cannot control the narrative of someone else's life, and that truth has a timing all its own. They try to mask the confusion with sarcasm, jokes, or exaggerated stories, but it doesn't work. You don't need to explain yourself, and their attempts only highlight how powerless they are in the face of your existence. Every contradictory statement they make, every sideways comment, every attempt to reduce your presence to a rumor exposes them further. The beauty of it is simple. You aren't responsible for their comfort or understanding. You are accountable only to your growth, your path, and your reality. And as you move forward on your own terms, they are left defending a version of you that never existed, while the real you walks freely, unbothered, and untouchable. They don't know which version of you to explain, because the one that matters never belonged to them. Number 9. They confused isolation with erasure. There's a difference between stepping back to rebuild yourself and actually being gone. People don't always understand that. They saw your absence and assumed it meant you were finished, broken, or irrelevant. They didn't stop to consider that you were working, reflecting, and moving forward in ways that weren't visible to the world. Silence, privacy, and distance became a convenient excuse for them to write you off. In their minds, if you weren't performing for them, if you weren't giving them the drama, the updates, the proof of struggle, then you must no longer exist. They mistook your strategic withdrawal for complete erasure, and that miscalculation is exactly what makes your return so shocking. Isolation was your choice. Erasure was theirs to assume. You needed time to navigate your life on your own terms, to rebuild your strength, and to reclaim control of your narrative. They, on the other hand, assumed that absence meant defeat, that distance meant disappearance, that silence meant surrender. Every rumor, every whispered assumption, every confident statement about your supposed downfall was based on a misreading of your life. They didn't see the late nights, the early mornings, the quiet victories that don't make headlines. They only saw the space where you weren't performing for their approval or entertainment, and they filled it with the story they wanted to believe. Now that you're back, intact and unshakable, their assumptions crumble. Every word they utter about you sounds frantic, contradictory, or hollow, because reality refuses to match the narrative they created. They treated your life like it belonged to them, but life doesn't belong to anyone except the person living it. Isolation was never disappearance, and your re-emergence proves that nothing they said, nothing they imagined, and nothing they assumed could erase you. They confused isolation with erasure, and that's why the shock of your presence is so destabilizing. While they were busy rewriting your ending, you were quietly building a reality they weren't ready to face. And now, when you return fully present and unbothered, every assumption they made falls apart, leaving them exposed, scrambling, and painfully aware that absence is not the same as defeat. Number 10. Your comeback exposed who benefited from your fall. When people watched you struggle, stumble, or disappear, they didn't just observe. Some quietly celebrated. Not everyone, but enough to notice. Your absence became someone else's opportunity, their moment to feel taller, smarter, or more significant at your expense. They whispered behind your back, smiled at your supposed defeat, and claimed victories they didn't earn, thinking no one was paying attention. They assumed your silence meant submission, that your setbacks meant they could take what they wanted without consequence. And for a while, it seemed like that might be true. But what they didn't know was that every second you spent away, every struggle you faced in private, every choice to rise rather than retaliate, was quietly building the kind of comeback that would expose them in the harshest light. Your return didn't just announce your survival. It revealed the truth of who thrived while you were down. Suddenly, those who had leaned on your absence, who had enjoyed your setbacks, could no longer hide behind casual smiles or sarcastic jokes. Their supposed victories now looked hollow, awkward, and undeserved. Every whisper, every claim of superiority, every tiny celebration of your fall turned into a mirror reflecting their insecurity and moral compromise. The people who thought they had gained from your hardship were now confronted with the reality that your resilience and growth had made their advantage meaningless. And here's the deeper irony. Your comeback wasn't about them. It was about you, your life, your growth, your truth. Yet, by simply existing and thriving, you exposed the greed, envy, and opportunism that had been quietly celebrating your setbacks. You made visible what they tried to hide, and in doing so, you shifted the balance of power without uttering a single word against them. Your rise highlighted exactly who had benefited from your fall, and in exposing it, you reminded the world that no gain built on someone else's struggle is ever permanent. Your comeback proved that real strength doesn't just survive, it shines a spotlight on every false victory and forces everyone to reckon with the truth. Number 11. They can't admit you outgrew their reach. Some people measure their worth by how much control or influence they believe they have over others. When you were down, they felt secure, confident, even important, because they imagined you were still within their orbit, still predictable, still manageable. Every assumption they made, every story they told, every piece of gossip was rooted in the belief that they understood you and that you were trapped within their expectations. But the truth is, growth doesn't wait for permission, validation, or explanation. It happens quietly, steadily, and often in ways that are completely invisible until it's undeniable. And that's exactly what makes your return so destabilizing for them. They can't admit it, because admitting it would mean acknowledging that you were never theirs to contain. They can't say out loud that you evolved, became stronger, and outpaced the versions of yourself they thought they knew. That would undermine their entire sense of control and authority. So instead, they scramble, they joke, they gossip, they whisper about your respawn or comeback like it's something unnatural, trying to rationalize the impossible. The truth terrifies them because it exposes their misjudgment. You weren't following their script, you weren't bound by their timeline, and you certainly weren't waiting for their approval to rise. Every move you make now proves that you are untouchable in the ways that truly matter. Not because you seek to prove them wrong, but because your life is yours alone. And their inability to admit it only highlights their weakness. They're stuck in their own stories, insisting that the person they once knew still exists, while the real you moves forward, unrestricted, confident, and unbothered. You've outgrown their reach, and that's the quiet power that shakes them more than any argument could. Your presence, your energy, your continued evolution exposes that control is an illusion, that assumptions are fragile, and that real growth cannot be predicted, contained, or explained by anyone other than the one living it. Their discomfort isn't about you, it's about the truth they refuse to accept. You were never theirs, and now you're proof of it. Number 12. They needed a myth to replace the truth. When you returned from a season they thought had finished you, they couldn't handle the simple truth. You survived, you grew, and you thrived on your own terms. The reality of your life, quiet, deliberate, relentless, wasn't dramatic enough for them. People crave stories that are extreme, sensational, and easily digestible, because plain truth is hard to process when it undermines their assumptions. So they created a myth. Suddenly, you came back from the dead, you respawned, or you were some unexplainable force. The story was bigger than you, louder than you, and far more entertaining than reality. They needed this exaggeration because the real story, the one built on resilience and silent work, was too simple and too powerful for them to admit. The myth serves them in two ways. First, it distances them from accountability. If your comeback is magical or impossible, they don't have to confront the fact that they misjudged you, dismissed you, or underestimated you. Second, it gives them something to talk about without addressing the real threat, your strength. Myths disguise the truth in spectacle, transforming what is actually ordinary human perseverance into something otherworldly. It's easier for them to label your life as unbelievable than to accept that you simply refused to be defeated. Every rumor, every joke, every exaggerated story is their attempt to make sense of your existence while protecting their own egos. But here's the catch. Myths can't contain the person who lived the truth. They can make jokes, post memes, and exaggerate your story, but they can't erase the quiet, undeniable proof that you accomplished everything they said you couldn't. Your life doesn't need embellishment to be remarkable. The myth only highlights their discomfort with the truth they can't face. They needed a myth because the truth would hurt too much, that you worked, endured, and survived without needing their permission, approval, or understanding. And now, every myth they spread becomes a reflection not of you, but of how rattled they are by the reality they refuse to see, proving that the strongest stories are often lived quietly while others scramble to explain them with noise. Number 13. They're watching you like a glitch in the system. When people thought you were gone, finished, or broken, they built a neat little world around that assumption. They told themselves everything made sense because you weren't there to disrupt it. They assigned themselves victories they hadn't earned and created narratives that put them on top while you were out of play. And then you came back, Suddenly, all of their tidy assumptions, all of their supposed control, all of their confident gossip collapsed in an instant. To them, you didn't just exist. You were a glitch, a malfunction in the reality they had painstakingly constructed, and they had no idea how to respond. That's why their words now sound frantic, contradictory, or absurd. Every story they told, every confident claim they made, is now exposed as a lie or a miscalculation. The person they thought they understood, the version of you they filed in a mental box, no longer exists. You are moving, thriving, evolving, and surviving on a frequency they can't decode. They try to rationalize it, but nothing fits. Your existence becomes proof that life refuses to follow the scripts people write for others, and that sometimes the biggest surprises come not from chaos, but from the quiet, steady unfolding of someone who refuses to be contained. This glitch isn't about chance. It's about preparation, resilience, and relentless focus. While they were busy celebrating your absence or fabricating stories about your downfall, you were quietly building, quietly learning, quietly becoming untouchable in ways they will never understand. And that's what makes their panic so revealing. They aren't afraid of you. They're afraid of the truth you represent. That control, prediction, and certainty over another person's life are illusions. They're watching, scrambling, and struggling to make sense of something that never fit their expectations. And the more they panic, the clearer it becomes that their stories, their assumptions, and their sense of superiority were built on sand. You exist outside of it, unbothered, unstoppable, and undeniable. Their systems failed to contain you, and the glitch you represent is living proof that reality always outruns speculation. Number 14. Your survival became louder than their words ever were. There's a quiet power in simply existing when everyone else assumed you were finished. All the gossip, all the rumors, all the confident declarations about your downfall suddenly pale in comparison to the undeniable reality of your life. Your survival isn't loud because you announce it. It's loud because it doesn't need an explanation. Every step you take, every move you make, every breath you draw in your fully restored presence speaks louder than their words ever could. They spent so much energy trying to define you, to explain you, to reduce you to a story they could control, but your existence refuses to fit into their neat little boxes. That is what makes it terrifying for them. People can talk endlessly about what they think happened, what they hoped happened, or what they wanted to happen. They can shout, whisper, or gossip for hours, but words have limits. They are fragile, fleeting, and easily disproven. Your survival, on the other hand, is irrefutable. Every glance at your life, every acknowledgement of your strength and presence, dismantles every lie they told, every assumption they made, and every story they spread in your absence. It becomes impossible for them to cling to their version of events without looking foolish, because reality is louder than any rumor, sharper than any insult, and more persistent than any lie. The irony is delicious. They thought that talking, predicting, and gossiping would shape your story, but you didn't need them. You didn't need anyone to validate your existence, to confirm your growth, or to approve your survival. By living, thriving, and showing up fully intact, you became the ultimate contradiction to their narrative. Their voices now echo with emptiness, trying to fill the space that your presence occupies so effortlessly. Your survival became louder than their words ever were, because it doesn't require justification, explanation, or embellishment. It simply is. And in that truth, you've created a reality they cannot argue with, cannot rewrite, and cannot escape. You live, and in living, you've proven that existence, authenticity, and resilience always speak louder than noise, lies, or assumptions. Conclusion. At the end of the day, this isn't just a story about gossip, rumors, or people who underestimated you. It's a story about truth, resilience, and the unstoppable force of someone who refuses to be confined by other people's assumptions. Every point we've explored, from people watching you disappear to declaring your ending too early, to trying to mythologize your comeback, paints the same picture. When you rise on your own terms, no one else's narrative matters. Life doesn't wait for the approval, understanding, or comprehension of those who try to define you. Your absence, your silence, and your strategic retreat weren't weaknesses. They were the very conditions that allowed you to rebuild, evolve, and come back stronger than they ever imagined. What makes your story so powerful is that it's undeniable. Words, gossip, lies, and assumptions have limits. They fade. Reality does not. Your life, your survival, and your growth have proven over and over that the truth can never be fully contained or controlled by anyone other than yourself. Every rumor about your downfall, every exaggerated story about your disappearance, every joke meant to diminish you has been overshadowed by the quiet, unshakable proof that you not only survived, you thrived. You've become the living contradiction to their assumptions, the undeniable evidence that growth, resilience, and authentic power cannot be erased or reduced to someone else's story. And here's the real takeaway. This is not about proving them wrong or retaliating against their ignorance. It's about understanding the immense power in simply existing, thriving, and letting your life speak for itself. The people who doubted, dismissed, or celebrated your supposed downfall are left scrambling because your reality cannot be ignored. Your survival, your return, and your transformation are louder than any words they could ever utter, and that truth will continue to speak long after the gossip fades. If this message resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or if it shook you awake to the power of your existence, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with anyone who needs to hear this truth. Drop a comment below about how you've risen, or witnessed someone else rise, and let's amplify the stories that remind us all. Reality is unstoppable, and so are you. Stay awakened, chosen ones.